It's kind of wild to think that a single word buried in a legal code could actually change how much you pay in property taxes. But that's exactly what's happening. We're going to unpack a local fight that has some really big implications for the entire state.
So it all boils down to this one question. When the government looks at your property and says, "Whoops, we got the value wrong," are they just fixing a simple error, like a typo, or are they doing a whole new assessment? Because believe me, the answer to that question really matters to your wallet and your rights.
Okay, so you've got two totally different takes on this. On one side, the state is saying, look, this is just an objective correction. We found a mistake, we're fixing it. Simple as that. But the local assessor, he's saying, no, hold on. This isn't like fixing a spelling mistake. This is about professional judgment, and you can't just call that an error to get your way.
All right, so let's get into the weeds here. We'll start with the state's argument. How are they justifying these retroactive changes to property taxes?
So the state's whole argument really hinges on this specific law about correction of error. They read this and see it as a green light to go back and change what they call objective mistakes. And we're not just talking about small things, we're talking about huge changes, like deciding a property that was taxed as residential should have been commercial all along.
And look, the state has built a pretty detailed case for themselves. They're insisting these are just corrections, not brand new assessments. They're pointing to an attorney general's opinion to back them up, and another law, they say, gives them this authority. And to top it all off, they're saying, don't worry, taxpayers are protected, they can still appeal.
When you really boil it all down, the state's argument is basically this. We're the state, we get to define what a correction is. And if we say it's a correction, then local officials just need to fall in line. It's a very clear top-down command.
But, and this is a big but, the local assessor, Rob Mitchell, he is not falling in line. He's come back with a really strong counter-argument. He believes the state isn't just misinterpreting the law, he thinks they're dangerously overstepping their bounds.
For the assessor, it's actually pretty simple. An error is what you and I would think of as an error, a clerical mistake, a typo, getting a number wrong. It's not, in his view, a tool you can use to go back and retroactively change an expert's considered professional opinion.
And this slide, I think, really hits the nail on the head. You know, saying a building exists is a fact, but deciding if that building's use is commercial, that's a judgment call. Saying a lot is 1.2 acres is a fact, but figuring out the value of that acre, that takes expertise. You can correct a fact, but you can't really correct a judgment.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The assessor says the state is cherry-picking. He points out that the very same attorney general's opinion the state is leaning on has a line in it that says this correction process cannot be used for things that require appraisal judgment. It's a huge point.
Okay, so this might seem like a really technical legal fight, but why should you care? Because how this one little word gets defined has massive real-world consequences for property owners. This is where it stops being abstract and starts affecting your bank account.
See, here's the trick. By calling a major reevaluation a simple correction, the government gets to take a shortcut. They can bypass the normal, public, transparent process for assessing property. And that shortcut means the property owner is left with a shorter timeline and fewer ways to fight back. And get this. With this correction shortcut, taxpayers often have just 45 days to appeal a change. Think about that. 45 days to scramble, hire experts, and build a case against what could be a huge, out-of-the-blue tax increase. It's not a lot of time. So what this all really comes down to is a classic power struggle. Who's in charge here? Is it the state officials from the Capitol, or is it the locally elected expert whose job it is to know the community? And ultimately, who has the taxpayer's best interest at heart?
This quote from the assessor just says it all, doesn't it? He's making the case that professional integrity has to mean something. You can't just relabel an expert opinion as a typo because it helps balance the budget or because it's the easier path to take.
So the assessor is essentially flipping the pyramid upside down. He's saying, look, first comes the law, then comes the professional judgment of the people who are actually trained to do this work, and way down at the bottom is guidance from the state, which is only valid if it respects the first two. So we're left with this huge, fundamental question that goes way beyond this one county or this one tax dispute. It's about governance. Where do you draw that line? How much power should a state agency have over a local expert that you, the voter, put in office? It's something to think about.